Announcements. Hi, everybody. I'm Caitlin, the VP of Training. I'm so excited to see all of you with us tonight. Thank you for joining. We've got some great trainings up ahead, along with our wonderful training tonight, that I just wanted to let everybody know about. On Thursday, November 5th, we have a technology and league leadership training. It's going to be with Lynn Huckabee, our very own executive VP. And she's going to kind of be walking us through all of the technology that the league uses to do the work that we do. And if you aren't a leader and you still want to attend, I highly recommend it. It'd be a good chance to kind of get some basic information. And if you are a league leader like me and you have no idea where to save your files and you have a million questions about technology because it's not your favorite thing, definitely join. No question too small. Highly recommend you coming. And then on Monday, November 9th, we have an AGLI training addressing microaggressions. It's actually just going to be with the Boston League, but it's a training that has been formulated by AGLI that's going to be facilitated by our own Courtney Scrubs, who is VP-elect of membership and also the co-chair of the Board Seat Initiative. And she is a fabulous speaker and a great moderator. If you've been to any of the trainings last spring that she moderated, you'll know. So it's a not to miss event, and we do have to cap it. So I highly recommend getting registered now before that sells out. But on to our lovely presentation for tonight. I am so excited for this. As you all know, our work in the field has been halted due to COVID. The work that we do with women and girls and the support that we've been able to give virtually through tutoring and the drives. Everybody check out Women for Women on the website. If you haven't heard about it yet, we're doing some pretty extensive drives. And everybody should get on the bandwagon, share that via social media. But unfortunately, we're not in the schools anymore. We're not in the classrooms. We're not in the after school care programs, and we're not seeing what's happening. So I couldn't be more grateful to our speakers tonight, Sarah and Carolina, who are bringing us information straight from the Rafael Hernández K-8 School. And they're going to talk about how COVID has impacted equity in the Boston public school system, which I think is just an imperative conversation for us to have. So thank you both for sharing your evening with us. We are indebted to you. I know how busy everyone is, so we really appreciate your time, and I'm going to pass it right over to you. Thank you so much.
Welcome, folks. Thank you so much for coming out. It's like late at night. It's a weeknight. Just as a disclaimer, you will see my 2.5-year-old son running around in the background. So the joys of motherhood and principaling are quite great. My name is Carolina Brito. I am the very, very proud principal of the Rafael Hernández Dual Language School located in the heart of Roxbury. I have been a part of the community for a short time, but in fact, COVID hit right at my tenure. And so I am very excited to just tell you what we've gone through and what the experience has been. And I will give you a disclaimer. Every school in BPS is such a unique microcosm of worlds. And so today I'm going to speak to a little community of about 400 kids, the majority of whom are Latino students, 85% Hispanic, and our ratio of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch is about 80% of our kids. So to give you a sense of like what slice of demographic we're going to be talking about, that is definitely who our lovely, wonderful, and resilient families are. Joining me is Sarah Kilroy. Sarah, you want to tell them who you are?
Sure. Good evening, everybody. I want to first thank the Junior League of Boston for inviting us to talk. I so appreciate it, and we were so excited last year when we were granted a grant from all of you, and then to be welcomed to share more about us is really, really special. So thank you. We're not given that many opportunities to talk to groups like yours, so this is an awesome chance. I'm the executive director of the Friends Group. I came to the Hernandez 7 years ago as the director of the after school program. And so I stayed. I'm here doing the work and super, super excited about what we're about to share with you. You know, it's a very challenging time for a lot of people, and I am just really, really humbled and feel so special to be a part of the work at the Hernandez, because there's a lot of amazing things that are happening every day there. So, yeah, that's a little bit about me. Now I think we're going to go into breakout rooms, and let me skip to the next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about who's in the room. Caitlin, do you mind? Are you the one who's breaking us into the breakout groups with Carolina and I?
Our lovely Shannon is actually going to do that for us. So she will be distributing everybody into their breakout rooms.
Yep, I will open the breakout rooms now, and we'll be in them for 10 minutes.
For 10 minutes, and when we're in the breakout rooms, we're going to just say our name, our profession, and why we're here, and what brought you to the conversation tonight.
Okay, I will open those up right now.
Thank you. In the small groups, we are going to we're going to begin talking about 4 different parts this evening. We have broken it down to discuss a little bit about us and our long, colorful history, the mission of the school, the Hernandez School, and then the mission of the Friends of the Hernandez. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about what we were doing for the first 20 years of our incorporation and the different projects that we were involved in at the Hernandez School, and then talk a little bit about what's been happening with COVID, particularly in our community, and then finally wrap up with more discussion around how we've moved to ACT in the last 8 months and where we are looking to go. So I'm going to turn it over to Carolina to talk a little bit about our history and missions.
Sarah, do you mind while I go to just pop up the slide deck for us?
It's not showing?
No, but I'll just start going. So
Okay.
The reason we go into our history is actually really, really simple. I think every community has been hit by COVID 100% differently. And a lot of it, you would have to understand the context that we're embedded in for you to understand sort of why it hits us all differently. Every one of you has been hearing in the news, like the disproportionality effect of COVID on communities of color. And I think part of the narrative too that I want to tell to you today is that also the way that it's hitting us, of course, we're impacted by poverty and different factors, but we're also, the way we are able to respond is very special because of this history of resilience and strength in the community that we're from too. And so I think there's 2 parts to the story that I think are both equally important to tell. Yes, we're victims of double pandemics right now, both a racial one and like a physical disease, but that only tells a part of who we are. And I want to make sure that, like, in talking about our Latino families, that I also name the fact that, like, when we were founded in the 70s, we're the first dual language bilingual school on the East Coast. It was actually a group of Puerto Rican parents who were tired of watching their kids drop out in the 5th grade because they didn't have linguistic access in their BPS schools. So this is actually like a community organized institution that we're we're super proud of, because that is a very rare thing in the city of Boston. And so in fact, we were born in 76. In fact, Judge Garrity, for those of you who know the story of desegregation in Boston and busing, Judge Garrity basically allowed our school to exist in the middle of desegregation because our charter originally started with this idea that the building would open its doors to 50% Latino students and 50% white students. And the idea was to actually try this experiment of integration. Many years later, here we are in 2020. Currently, our demographic is 85% Latino, 15% like all kinds of other folks in the building. And I think it's very interesting because, as many of you who follow like education in the news, we are at a point of segregation in schools that is actually significantly steeper than it was even in 1963. And so just to give you a sense, it's a desegregation experiment that works very well in the early grades. So K1 and K2, you keep a 50-50 ratio first grade. And then very slowly, you see this interesting drop off, and the balance tips more towards Latino families for reasons that we can like definitely talk about. But I think it's very important for you to sort of immerse yourself in who we are and where we're situated in the city of Boston. Keep it coming, Sarah.
Okay. We're going to show the video. This.
But she did have a big influence in Boston. She may not be as famous as J-Lo and Ricky Martin, but she did have a big influence in Boston.
En los 70 era una ciudad bastante were Latinos discriminated against? Sure they were.
So we had, I think, 8 language groups at one point, all demonstrating for bilingual programs. And Margarita was one of the people that I do recall. In 1981, Margarita became the principal of the Rafael Hernández School.
Margarita tuvo muchos problemas en la cuestión de su web.
Uno siempre está premiado. He was really often up against the district. She was asking for the things that she needed from the school.
And not only
She wanted something for the children that she served in the school that she may not have had encountered herself, having come to this country alone. Ejemplo de su familia, de su padre, de Juan. Eso tenía que ser así cuando ella que ella hizo la escuela, la familia que ella formó en la escuela, la cuidáramos hasta que murió. The school committee approves Margarita Muñiz Academy.
a smile comes to my face when I think that we, the Boston Public Schools, are able to establish a school that allowed for a kindergarten through grade 12 continuum of civil language, and that we were able to honor a critical leader whose full life's passion really was focused on students.
Carolina, you're up with the mission.
So really quickly, as you could tell sort of from our like little snippet, we had a documentary made of our community many years ago. Currently, our mission is super simple. And this is a mission that is, by the way, very difficult to keep in the middle of COVID. But the idea is to actually develop bilingual, biliterate, and multicultural students who are models of social consciousness and academic excellence. And so that means that actually our model, what it's built to do is to basically say to kids, you're bilingual. That's an enormous gift. You have an intellectual capacity and a neural pathway like framework that people are super envious of. And so I want to be able to preserve that in the community as an enormous asset, and that this is a space in which your identity is a precondition to your intellectual greatness. And so in order for us to do that and to affirm who the kids are and like say yes to the language that their parents speak, it requires a kind of like steely commitment to being able to do that in the middle of remote learning conditions that is innovative and sort of superhuman at times. So definitely wanted to make sure that you guys sort of knew that. And we can't do the work actually because it is such an incredibly challenging thing to fund, because basically you have to build curriculum in 2 languages, build instructional materials in 2 languages, that Sarah Kilroy's work in the Friends of the Hernandez is invaluable as our partner arm of the organization. Sarah, tell them a little bit what you do.
So you can see our beautiful mission there, but to put it simply, Rafael Hernandez's work is to support all Hernandez families. And so we have been around since 2001. We were founded by parents and community members. It was a time where the playground of our school at the time was a dumping ground. There were cars, broken glass. This was supposed to be the place where our children were playing. And really the parents in the community got fed up. And so they started meeting and started to do cleanups, have before school, after school cleanups, and got to know one another a little bit more. And through that advocacy and through that organizing, they decided that really what we needed as a school at the time was a mechanism for being able to fundraise and to take in dollars and to be able to add things that the Hernandez School and the Boston Public Schools at that time were not able to provide for our students. So you can see on the screen right now is a picture of a mural that was this very old mural, very colorful. If you're ever driving down Columbus, you'll see it. And then our Soul Train program is one of our after school programs. It's a running program in the city, and there's a picture of our students. So to talk a little bit more specifically about the programs and projects that Friends have been involved in prior to COVID, as I talked a little bit about the incorporation in 2001, our flagship program was an after school program. And so after the playground was cleaned and that kept ongoing, the nonprofit was founded, it was decided that the school, because of the hours and there was many working families, they needed some type of holding space and some type of program for their kids. And so the school took on building an after school program. And since 2001, we've been running the after school program for 20 years. It's grown to serve about 150 to 60 students Monday through Friday, 15 plus hours a week. We have arts and dance and African dance and karate. There's all kinds of things that are happening in the after school program when COVID isn't happening. We also, another project that's been very central to the work of the Friends is a mini grant program for teachers. So teachers, when they see professional development opportunities or they see things that they want for their kids in their classes that they might not have in the school budget, they apply for mini grants through our foundation, through the Friends group, through the nonprofit arm. We 3 years ago had a participatory action research project where literally a school class of 7th and 8th graders met for 2 years, and they did research and they went around to different playgrounds and they fundraised to get, you see the slide, there's a picture of our new playground, because the playground that they had was a place where kids would have a lot of accidents. It was a concrete surface, and falling from the monkey bars, there were lots of broken bones. So the students saw that and they recognized the need and they acted, and we have a beautiful playground now. So it was a partnership with the city of Boston, and the superintendent at the time came, and the mayor, for the grand opening, and there was over $1 million raised for that project. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what's been happening in terms of COVID and our community here at the Hernandez. So I know that I mentioned that you might see or hear my children in the background. I have two small children. I have a first grader who is currently doing remote learning every day next to me on the next room over. And I have a 3-year-old child who gratefully she's at daycare for the majority of the time. She's at a small family daycare. But I want you all to think about, I know in my experience with small children working full time, I'm bouncing back and forth from questions about how to spell things and mom, what's this math problem? Like, help me here. You know, it's a lot of like, I'm basically teaching or helping to guide my kid in her learning every day. And so I wanted to see if there are any folks on the call this evening that had stories that they heard or experiences that they have had that they want to share about what their life is right now. If you have small children, or if you know friends who have small children that are doing remote learning in the home with you. And if you could also throw it in the chat too, if you would like.
I'll go. I'm home with a 2-year-old. It's really isolating from a parent perspective because you lose your mom tribe a lot. And it's really difficult just chatting with a small child all day, and you're like, why, you need friends, and you don't really realize how much they learn from other kids and how important that social interaction is. I mean, we all know how important it is for us as adults, but developmentally for children, it, even from like a really small age, it's so important, and just something that they're all really missing out on right now.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that. I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of bath time with my 2-year-old, but yeah, for me, it's been difficult. Luckily, my son is at daycare full time. So, but when he wasn't, when our daycare had closed down, it was really tough. I mean, for me, it felt like I was on maternity leave on steroids. It was just like with your kid all the time, and you know, I felt like I was doing everything 50%, like being a parent at 50%, working at 50. And that was just kind of like a bad feeling, especially when you're used to being able to give like 100%. But, you know, given the circumstances, that's not always possible.
Let's hear from one more person. It's your moment of truth, y'all. I want to lift up what Amanda's saying. I'm a big sister, and my little 10-year-old tells me the only time of her day she moves is during virtual recess. She never gets to leave the house and only sees her parents. It's a very common experience in our families. I wanted to hear you guys and where you were, because I think it's important that you sort of hear the stories of our families. And in fact, in preparation for this, we actually we of course like know many of the stories of our kids, but we asked a few families to get on camera to tell their stories themselves today. And so we're going to tell you some of those stories that aren't on camera, but then we have a little clip for you too. I want to start with the story of one mom in particular. She is single mom, and actually we were so proud of her because she had finally walked away from an abusive relationship around March. You guys do the math. What happens when you walk away? Like in March, it means that she abandoned a stable roof, because she wanted independence for herself and her own physical safety. In that moment, so she was in some temporary housing, finally found a job right around the time schools were opening. And her children were actually in the high priority list, so they were going to come back to the building first. When she finally got this job cleaning at a hotel, it was not more than 2 weeks later that BPS then announced closure again because rates were spiking. And she was forced to bring her kids every single day to the hotel, sneaks them in to this day, every day, in a conference room that is now no longer being used in this hotel because that's the only place that she can get internet. Another parent in the second slide there, it is not an uncommon thing for many of our parents who have been homeless during this period, started or became homeless during this period, and are actually having to leave their kids with distant relatives. One mom in particular, actually, one grandmother in particular, is the caretaker of 5 grandkids. And she has been holding down the fort until mom, who has been incarcerated for the last 3 years, until mom comes home. And so this family, there's at least 3 siblings, 2 of whom are our students. Then while they ask grandma every day, like, where's my mom? Grandma in the last month has actually had to stop working, and therefore that family, 5 children who depend on her, are basically now without employment. Well, the grandmother is without employment because she's, I think, 81 now, and is extremely high risk. And so those 5 kids have depended on our ability to sort of figure out rent relief, food, and in fact, we've had teachers since the middle of March bring like weekly groceries to the door. And really, actually, it's been quite the challenge to help grandma navigate 5 Zooms simultaneously in remote learning. And Lord love this woman because she's trying with everything she's got. And I love her resilience in the fact that she's like relearning Zoom at the age of 81 or learning it for the first time. But it is an impossible situation. Even families that I know who are very, very well resourced to be able to do this are struggling with multiple children. I cannot imagine being 81, unemployed, and having to like run around after 5 littles. And that is not an uncommon story. And so we wanted to actually just show you a little bit about what these 2 stories tell us at a larger scale. And it's what we've all been reading in the New York Times. It's that the crisis is disproportionately affecting our kids, our communities. Like Black and brown families feel this very differently. And in fact, some very interesting stuff happened throughout Boston where we were actually finding that like Caucasian families were disproportionately more comfortable sending their kids to the building than Black and brown families. And when asked why, it's because most families that I know, at least in my school, because I can only speak to my context confidently, when we would ask them, so like, the building is open, you're on the high priority list, why don't you want to send your kids in? It's because every single Latino family knows at least 5 people who have died from this. And so for them, the like hitting close to home reality of the possible effects of limited healthcare, limited access to like alternative employment options or childcare are so real and so debilitating that getting sick has ripple repercussions that are so different for our families. Thus, actually, why we're seeing a huge number of families, despite the fact that remote learning is not fun or really like adequate to many, many of the kids' needs, they've preferred to opt into it because it's physically safer. And as they've opted into it, we've had to retool and relearn how to do school in order to be able to sort of bridge the technological divide that's existed among generations of our families too. And in fact, one of the things that we've had to do in order to be able to respond is actually try to pivot many of our programs. Sarah's is actually a great example of it. We pivoted all of after school programming and staff into being able to cover response for this crisis. There's a few things that we're trying to creatively manage that we'll tell you more about shortly.
We've heard some specific stories of families at the Hernandez, and Carolina alluded to a video clip that we're going to show in a minute of some recent stories and conversations that some of our Hernandez staff have had. Carolina shared a little bit of some data that was released, a report that was released by UMass Boston, looking specifically at Latino nonprofit sectors. I know that at my conversations with the Junior League prior to this call, I know that the Junior League is also interested in learning more about the broader impact on Latinos as a whole. And you know, it's apparent to us that this equity gap in education is continuing to widen between even students in our own Hernandez community. And you know, in March when COVID hit, flip it to the next slide. Carolina, our brave leader, went full steam ahead, and the community has really been working since then to figure out the best ways to respond to the needs of our community in the moment, real time. And they were shifting a lot in the spring and have continued to shift, and we keep pivoting, as Carolina talked about the after school program. And so we're excited to share with you where we are right now. So I'm going to go ahead and play the clip, Carolina.
Sarah, there's no audio on it.
Me ha afectado bastante porque he tenido que dejar de trabajar, el trabajo no está bueno. Estoy justamente pendiente de mi nieta con las clases de la escuela para que ella pueda pasar de grado y su nota siempre esté buena. Me ha afectado en muchos sentidos, porque esto me ha dado a mi depresión, esto me ha dado a mí de todo un poco, de todo, de todo. Esto no ha sido fácil. Y para el colmo ahora empieza la escuela de nuevo, que es mucho más pendiente tenemos que estar. No afectan de muchas maneras, principalmente emocional, el trabajo. He dado en la casa con los niños, tratando de echar para adelante. Ha sido bien difícil. Siempre ha sido algo que siento que no solamente a mí, a muchas personas, más que todo, digamos, a las personas que trabajar en el día a día. Entonces, la pandemia que se nos vino encima, muchos trabajos se cerraron, muchas oportunidades que nosotros teníamos que nos vinieron abajo. Entonces, pero gracias a Dios, ellos me dan bastante tipo de ayuda. No tengo que quejarme de la escuela Rafael Hernández. Una forma de que el Hernández no ha ayudado a nosotros. Son tantas cosas que si me pongo a enumerarlas, no voy a terminar. Emocionalmente, que es la principal. Porque una familia sin un estado emocional, el niño no puede seguir continuando en esta situación tan difícil. El apoyo de la maestra, de Ana, de Anita, de la directora, de todo del Hernández, ha sido increíble. No he visto un momento que yo haya hecho una llamada, que necesito ayuda con la tarea, que me hace falta algo, que no me hayan contestado el teléfono. Puede ser fin de semana, puede ser día de semana, y no importa la hora. El soporte que hemos recibido de Hernández, mi familia y yo, es inigualable. No tiene precio. Y mi familia y yo, y sé que muchos, igual que yo, están totalmente agradecidos. Y nos sentimos orgullosos de contar con la comunidad de la Escuela Hernández para todo lo que nosotros necesitamos. Déjame decirles que en estos tiempos se ha visto que Hernández tiene muchas personas que tienen un corazón grande, le podemos decir un corazón de oro, porque yo principalmente mi hijo estudia en Hernández y él ha tenido el apoyo, gracias a Dios, no solo de maestros ni los que están en la escuela, sino también de padres de afuera que se han ofrecido voluntariamente en dar el apoyo para que nos hace falta algo estar ahí. Yo le agradezco a Dios y luego a todas las personas de la Hernández, a los maestros, a los allegados, a los que están siempre necesitando el apoyo a las personas que tienen la necesidad. Me ha recibido bastante apoyo de la sociedad, de Hernández, toda la semana de partido, las profesionales, apoyo.
So we apologize if the audio is not great. At least we've got subtitles. One of the things that our families were referring to there is just sort of like the support that the school has been trying to develop to respond to COVID. And I will be very honest with you, one of the strangest things about this crisis is that it brings into sharp relief that the purpose of schools has radically shifted, at least in the urban sector. Because I will say this, overnight, I turned from an educational institution to like a FEMA director. So in March, as we started figuring out these stories and started getting a sense of the vastness of the need, within the first month, the first priority and the first thing we were really afraid of was kids having enough to eat. So we brought a team of folks together, and currently at this moment, the Hernandez feeds about 600 people a week. And so that's between BPS food, that's between donations. We've partnered with restaurants actually who like have overstock of food to deliver meals. And we've partnered with City Fresh and all kinds of insane organizations that are willing to just give us food for free so that we can then give it to families. And over the summer, we had like a major complex delivery system. The YMCA partnered with us. We've scaled it to like Fridays every single week at the corner of the YMCA in Eggleston, corner of School Street. And at that Y, we do distributions, and I have two folks who are family liaisons who stand on a corner for 2 hours every Friday and give out boxes of fresh food. So initiative number one was to feed humans until folks could get back on their feet. And what we found in this, I find very beautiful, because I told you I was here to tell you a story of solidarity. We find that families look out for each other. So you got one mom picking up for like 7 different people, and they sort of network, and like there's only 1 in 15 people who have a car. Cool. So that one person is just going to go and do deliveries for everybody else. And one of the moms mentioned on the video, which I find very, very beautiful, her kiddo, they came, I I believe from Guatemala. And their family has been helped by 3 other families in our community. And since March, like weekly faithful deliveries to the home because mom doesn't have a car. And so I think there's a lot of like networking and very powerful people power happening in order to make this happen that I don't want to skip because I think that stuff matters. We can only do so much. We need each other. The second frontier that we had to cross was actually school supplies. So school started and all of a sudden people are trying to teach remotely and they're like, wait a minute. They surveyed the 4th grade class and I kid you not, 6 in 10 kids actually did not own a notebook in the house. So at that point, BPS subsidized some of the school supplies this year, but we fundraised a significant amount over the summer foreseeing that we would have this problem. And so as of last week, we've been able to deliver or have parents pick up about 425 kits for school supplies that are leveled at different grades. And then our teachers fundraised a separate pool of money to make sure that we also had 425 art supply kits so that kids could actually also be creative and, you know, generate beauty at home. So we've tried to cross those 2 frontiers presently, and it's taken a lot of direction because in addition to the work that we've always done, which is to provide like connections for counseling, our numbers of kids who have requested it for themselves or for their families has tripled since March. Our requests for connections with social services in the same scale. And so basically we function as a school because 1/3 of our students are actually undocumented. 1/3 of their families are undocumented. We serve as like a service delivery hub. So in addition to like doing the work of educating and making sure that what kids are showing up to is worth all this sacrifice, we are thinking about how do you triage that kind of scale of need in one building? Because you'll remember that like language support is actually a very, very big deal in terms of who are you comfortable going to when you have a need? And I think that's an issue that really does not get talked about very often when you talk about social services or this kind of work. The city might provide beautiful, fantastic things, but people always our families always go to the people that they trust first. And so I think the foundation is like relationship, and we use that relationship to leverage or to connect families with what they need. And in fact, connect them to city stuff. Keep it coming, Sarah. So super quickly, we wanted to talk a little bit about what's coming next. We've talked you through sort of what our supply and food initiatives have been. The next frontier is a much more challenging one. So I told you the stories of 2 of our families who are basically in impossible situations because even when we were hybrid, at least they had 2 days of childcare, right? With that being gone, not even having the option of holding down a part-time job for moms of multiple kids, single parents especially, we've been trying to work on this problem. So what happens if you have no place to access internet, even if we get you vouchers? Those things actually can sometimes take months. And what happens when you don't have adult supervision, especially for students who are new to the country or have disabilities? When you need physically a grown-up around and you need a quiet space to work, how do I solve for this problem? And in fact, many of you have been keeping up with this phenomenon of pods across the country, learning pods where families sort of get together and subsidize the use of a tutor to like make the remote learning happen. So this is a thing of families of privilege, but what if we could do that for our kids too? So this next horizon of initiative is this crazy idea we have that is basically trying to create remote learning communities for the kids who need it most and whose families are not going to be able to foot that bill. Sarah, you want to tell us a little bit about it?
I do, but I just want us to stop and take a minute. And I want to recognize our school because there are right now, I think, Carolina, you probably know this better than I, but I believe there's 125 Boston public schools. And I want to recognize that no other school that I know of in the district has been able to mobilize and create the systems that we as a community have been able to create for our families in the last 8 to 9 months. Carolina talked about the supplies. She talked about the food distribution. You talked a little bit about the social services that we were providing some of the families and started to launch into this concept of the remote learning communities, but it's huge what we're doing right now. And so I know we want to jump into the sharing the good stuff, but I just really, this is an incredible undertaking that is being led by Carolina. And before I share about the specific partnerships that we've created, we know that this is possible. We know that we have set up these systems, but with the systems, there's always the challenge of the funding. We are a public school. We are working to feed families. We are working to provide supplies to our students. And we're also right now looking to find places for our kids to go during the day when in a regular school year, they would be able to go to school in a building. So that there is a significant financial need right now. And we looked at what we've been seeing, and right now we're anticipating costs of about $500 each week to feed all of our families that we've been feeding, the 600 family members or so since back in March. If we want to continue doing that, projected into at least June, we're thinking worst case scenario right now. We also are looking at approximately $10,000 in supply costs to help get us through until June at the end of the school year. And this is, we just did, I think we've done 2 so far, and it's almost November. So there's still, students go through supplies very quickly. My daughter, I lost the little whiteboard like 5 times and had to go to the store and buy markers like, I don't know how many times. And this piece that we're about to unveil is the remote learning community. And we have been fortunate enough to work with different partners up until this point, and we've secured around $125,000 to be able to send our students to these remote partnerships outside of our school building. But at this point, we still are coming up around $49,000, and we're continuing to talk to communities and groups about how to make this dream, this much needed resource for our students a reality. So we have been fortunate through conversations, and we've been working on this since July, to enter into a relationship with the Franklin Park Zoo. So the zoo is our neighbor. They sit right next to our school, a couple of blocks up, and we have been communicating with them about having our students show up, go to the zoo, and bring their BPS Chromebooks with them and their headsets, and they'll have a learning space in a barn to be able to have a space to go to, a safe space, a consistent environment every day. And they will be, we're in the process of hiring 2 coordinators. So they would be basically facilitators of these students learning. So they would be still learning with their teachers online in the curriculum of the school day, but at the same time, they have breaks, they have lunch and recess, and they'd be able to take advantage of the wonderful facilities of the zoo. I don't know if any of you on the call have ever been to the Franklin Park Zoo, but I tell you, my daughter, it's the favorite playground of hers in our area. It's huge. And so just to think about our kids being able to have access to that right now is really amazing. And we also, I mean, the zoo has animals, right? So they'll have the opportunity to be engaging with this material, like real life animals every day. And I can't think of a better experience for our kids when a lot of them have not had the opportunity to go outside of their houses to learn. So that is one of the 2 partnerships that we have talked about hosting our students for the remote learning communities. The second partner is our local Y. So they had traditionally served young youth, like teenagers, and they had been working with the EEC to be licensed to expand their programming hours to during the day. So they're literally 2 blocks from our school, which would be very helpful in communication between the students and the staff, as well as our school. They are hiring right now 3 professionals that would be able to work with the students day in and day out. Both of these programs, we're looking at a Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. schedule. So they're hiring people to be able to work with kids through their curriculum that they will be learning with teachers from the school, but they would have an adult to go to that has some educational experience. So before I move into, I think we're getting close to the end. I just want to recognize that in the last almost 40 years, the population of Latinos in the state of Massachusetts has significantly increased. We're at, 475%, this slide says. And so at the same rate, we have not been seeing a growth of nonprofit sector organizations nor funding to be able to support these families. And as Carolina spoke about earlier, as an entity, Friends of the Hernandez, we have had to pivot from our extracurricular programming opportunities for kids and their families to meeting people's basic needs, like human services. And so I can't stress enough how important the Friends group has been to really being able to help the Hernandez School become not only a school, I forget what you called it earlier, Carolina, but it's basically a one-stop shop for everything you need to support all of the things that are coming at you during this pandemic. So I am very grateful to be a part of this organization, and I really truly do recognize the need of having the Friends support the Hernandez School. So I believe it is question time, and I'm wondering if anybody has any questions for Carolina and I about any of the material that we've shared with you tonight. I just want to recognize I'm having a hard time seeing the chat. I am still learning about hosting meetings online like this in COVID, so I apologize.
My name is Amanda. I have a question. I guess as members of the Junior League, what can we do? I mean, would there be, for those of us that serve and, volunteer in the community and have an interest in helping the community, are there any volunteer opportunities available with your school that we might be able to be of service to?
Yes. You could ask. There's always volunteer opportunities. I think the things that have come up as most frequent need, there's probably about 2 or 3. One is the reality of the fact that a vast majority of our families don't have cars, and so little things like deliveries can mean a lot. So we have developed and perfected some systems for safe deliveries and tried to be mindful of the health of our staff and team and all that good stuff. So deliveries are always very, very welcome, and that can be food, and sometimes it's supplies, sometimes it's Chromebooks, all kinds of things that normally you would transit very easily in school. That's a very easy one. The other one we anticipate probably around January, we might need another round of supply packing. So I had a crew of 15 volunteers of all ages come into the building over a weekend, and we just did a little supply assembly line, with open spaces, and it was a safe space to be able to do it. But those little things go a really, really long way, because it actually takes hundreds of organizational hours to put something as silly as a supply kit together, as I have learned this time around.
I also want to say that we are a small staff at the Friends group, and we are we primarily work with volunteers to help write grant proposals. And so we're always looking for if you have any experience doing grant proposals, fundraising in general, that is always something that we welcome.
Could you put your information, your contact info in the chat so we could reach out
Yes, yes.
for both of you?
We did have one more question in the chat that came through, and Carolyn asked, what are some of the greatest impacts to some of your students on IEPs?
Great question. The challenge with students with IEPs in particular has been that in March, when we actually closed initially, their service delivery plans were radically altered. And so you have kids who have like speech and language needs, for example, who weren't able to access their interventionist because of the like complications around the contracts for the interventionist. Like you also have to remember that in my building, there are 5 different unions: the custodial, the teachers, the secretaries. There's actually 2 others, but those are the 3 that have the heaviest influence. And so I think one of the things that has been very challenging for me personally as a school leader is both having to balance the fact that kids have desperate needs like right now with having to negotiate labor laws and unions and like their own constituents being concerned about their health and safety has been very, very hard to be human to both parties. Our current challenge with students with IEPs and like knowing that many, many students didn't get the services that they needed through the summer even has now been being very creative about how we're going to do the service delivery with like one-on-one on Zoom. And for cases where we have to do evaluations, I've actually opened the buildings for the one-on-one evaluations. So, because that's actually a very, very big deal in being able to accurately diagnose things. Like on Zoom, you do not catch everything. It's like sincerely too medically difficult. And so we've opened the building to be able to do initial screenings. And in fact, BPS is now talking about potentially opening for students with severe needs in their IEPs to open for a very, very small select crew of kids, of which I would be very, very happy if they did that because some of these services are physically impossible to deliver virtually.
I also had a question. So I think it's great and it's wonderful if you're able to do things in person, but earlier you had mentioned that a lot of the Latin community is still uncomfortable. Is that something you're challenging with if they're not as comfortable doing things in person, and how are you going to be able to support those students and that need that with family dynamics as well?
That's a great question. We have, and I'll be honest with you, we don't win every recommendation that we make is not always followed, and we like believe in the autonomy of the families to do that. But there are cases in which from families who are DCF involved that I'm very worried about the child's like physical or emotional safety. We've made really impassioned pleas for those kids to come on in, and it like right now we have a 50% success rate with that. And I think part of it has also forced us to be a little bit more creative, and it's like, okay, well, what supports can we give you, family? So like it's then connecting somebody to the parent to be able to help the parent, because as the mom said in the video, I think she framed it as like, you cannot take care of your children if you're not in an emotional state where you can do that. And so some of it has like required some out of the box thinking, like maybe we can actually tack on an additional layer here that we hadn't thought of before. But yeah, I will be honest, there are many, many kids for whom it would have been better for them to be in the building. But the fear is real and legitimate. So it's something we've had to balance.
I want to just make a note I was able to figure out how to get into the chat, and I shared a link with all of you. If you want to share your contact information with us, we can also get in touch with you. So are there other questions about anything that we spoke about tonight?
Just while people are thinking about their questions, if anybody has any additional ones, I just want to thank you guys so much for tonight. I mean, so eye-opening for me. You read the news and you hear snippets, but nothing has really put it into perspective for me, like this conversation and really understanding. I mean, I had no idea. Like you said, a family could have lost, was it 4 or 5 people? That's so real, so much more real. You know, sometimes we kind of think of this thing as so far away, and how that would impact wanting to come back. And it's really, really eye-opening. So I really, really appreciate your time tonight. And I know that we'll, all of us, you know, will be looking for what you guys are going to be doing in the future and how we can support you, because it's truly, truly inspiring work what you guys are doing. And so grateful how busy you guys are that you would take the time to talk to us about it. So really appreciative.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah,
It's
of
an
course.
honor.
Anytime, always welcome. And we hope someday that we can welcome you guys and your families into our headquarters on Newbury Street someday soon. Someday we'll be together and not in Zoom. Sorry, that's my rice cooker. My husband's making rice.